And on behalf of ADDitude magazine, I am so pleased to welcome everyone to today's ADHD Experts broadcast on a topic very close to my heart, music and the ADHD brain. Leading our conversation today will be Patti Catalano, a board-certified music therapist who managed the music therapy program at MusicWorks Northwest in Bellevue, Washington. And she served as an adjunct professor of music therapy at Seattle Pacific University. Patti earned her master's in music from Colorado State University, where she was trained in the neurological perspective on therapy. Her experience includes music therapy with children and adults with physical and developmental disabilities, children with autism, early intervention, older adults and geriatrics, adults with Alzheimer's and dementia, pain management and oncology, and individuals with a variety of learning styles. So we are incredibly lucky and honored to hear Patti speak today on how music sparks, soothes, and optimizes the ADHD brain. This is just a truly fascinating topic, and today we will delve into how aspects of music such as rhythm, melody, tempo, instrumentation all engage our brains and how they help to activate attention, focus, and regulation. Patti will explain the research, and she's going to take it a step further and give us some specific ways that parents can harness the power of music to engage and optimize their kids' ADHD brains. So before I turn it over and we get started on that, I need to note just a couple of housekeeping items. Those of you who tuned into the live webinar, you may download the slides now by clicking on the Event Resources tab, or section, I should say, of your webinar screen. And if you are interested in the certificate of attendance option, please check your email later on this afternoon for instructions and a link. For those of you listening in replay or podcast mode, please visit ADDitudemag.com and search for podcast 335. There you can access the slides, the webinar replay, certificate of attendance option are all on that page. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Patti Catalano on this really rich topic of music and the ADHD brain. Patti, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Annie, and thank you, Lily, for your help as well. And welcome. It's December, and it's the end of 2020, and I'm so excited to have you here with me today and talk about, of course, I'm very biased, one of my favorite topics. So you've all read the description and understand that music really is universal. Things like lullabies, we start very young, and it's extremely, it's spread around the world. Things like lullabies, it's always interesting to me how like different instruments were created that are very similar in different parts of the world about the same time in history. And so we have this whole thing with music that is really completely engaging to us on many, many levels, as you're going to find out. Oops, I need to just click this one. There we go. So I'll just give you a brief introduction to music therapy because some people are familiar with what we do and others are not so familiar with it. It's the clinical and evidence-based use of music interventions to accomplish individualized goals within a therapeutic relationship by a credentialed professional who's completed an approved music therapy program. And the American Music Therapy Association approves different educational programs. We now have over 90 schools. I just heard at the music therapy conference last weekend that offer music therapy degrees, either bachelor's or master's level or doctoral levels. After we finish our academic, we do a 6-month clinical internship. Then we have to sit for our certification exam. And then finally, we become a board certified music therapist. Or an MTBC. A really quick kind of difference between, say, a music educator and a music therapist is that where the music educator is taking educational classes, we're all taking the same music classes. but they're taking more education geared classes. We're, of course, taking more therapy geared classes. We're looking at the psychology of music. We're looking at the effects of music on non-musical behavior. But at the same time, we are, kids are learning music. we're just, our focus is slightly different because we're looking at, okay, how can this help cognition? Or how can this help organization? Or how can this help behavioral regulation? So hopefully that explains it clearly. So why is music therapy so important, or why is music so important around the world? Some of the things that researchers have found, there's a lot of really cool music neuroscientists out there now, and they have been really studying, like, what does music mean to us from an evolution standpoint, from a historical standpoint, and they want to know, is it a biological imperative? Is it something that we respond to because the way we are built, or did it come about kind of culturally, historically, and we just got so used to it? Dr. Ani Patel, he equated it similar to what he was thinking at the time. And of course, they're finding out new things all the time. He equated it to the invention of fire. Once we invented fire, or discovered fire, it's such a powerful invention. We're never going to turn back. We're not going to get rid of it. And music, he feels, it's very, very much that same way. And he also says it lights up our brain like a Christmas tree. And it is one thing that we can do that utilizes the whole brain. And you can't really say that about a lot of things. Another researcher, Honing from the Netherlands, found out that 2-day-old infants can process syncopation. Now, that's a pretty amazing thing that they're doing that. And they put these little things on them, on their heads, and they play just a steady beat. Bup, 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 bup. And they would skip one once in a while. And the little baby's brains would just go, whoop. They'd create this thing, little electronic response that said, ooh, what is that? That made me curious. What could that be? And so they noticed that in that steady beat, if one was skipped, they recognized that there was something different about it. Other researchers have looked at how music may have actually been the precursor to language rather than language being the precursor to music. And if you think about the way we talk to babies, we used to call it motherese. Now we're looking more at parentese. We talk in a more sing-song voice to babies. This engages babies. This creates that tie, that relationship that's so important for survival. And so we are, from a very, very young age, responding to them in that way. And it's not baby talk. It's just the way our voices might go up a little more, or we might have more contours to it when we talk to them. And it is possible that this is actually kind of like early music and really helped contribute to language. Language and music share a lot of things in common. Dr. Nina Kraus is another researcher from Northwestern University at the Brain Vaults Lab, and I was lucky enough, I've followed her research for years, and Brain Vaults Lab just publishes their research on their site. You can look any of this up. It's really pretty fascinating, the different things that they do. And she presented for our most recent music therapy conference, and she said the hearing brain is vast, and that our downward connections and pathways are more massive than the pathways going upwards connecting the ear to the brain. So in other words, we're taking it in and we're sending it back out all the way through our bodies. And our auditory systems connect with our rewards and emotional system. So anything that has to do with feelings, it goes to the reward center, which really is where dopamine is produced, and is very similar to it's the same reward system that cocaine excesses, as well as other good things. And so that is one thing that about music that it can be kind of addictive in that way, because it triggers our reward system. It also triggers our cognitive system. Other research has shown that as to why music is addictive for many of us is because we take it in, we try to figure it out, so it goes to our cognitive system, and then we figure it out, and we're like, voila, ooh, that felt good. And then it goes to our reward system, so that releases some good neurotransmitters, feeling excited about the reward. So then we seek it out again. And so we have this cycle. It also gets us moving. It interacts with our motor system. It's really difficult to not start tapping your feet to music that you find engaging or moving in some way. And then finally it goes to our sensory system. And this is how we interact with the world. And this is how we recognize things. So this is all the things our auditory system connects to, and music is a major part of that. All of this is going to affect how our brain will respond to sound. And each one of us, no matter where we are in the world, each has our own sonic fingerprint on how we process sound. Dr. Krauss, for her presentation, her keynote, played a bit of a Beatles song and then played back the brain waves so you could hear the because it's all electrical signals of 3 different people who were processing that music. And each of those brainwaves sounded different as to how they were processing it. So it'd be interesting to see if they come up with a sonic fingerprint as an identification sometime in how we process sound. And this all has to do with our, physical equipment of where, how we're processing sound, but also has to do with our, nurture. How have we grown up with sound? How have we interacted with sound? And that's going to influence also our brain and how we have our sonic fingerprint. So she called it sound special sauce in how it engages us. Harmonics are what triggers when a sound triggers. Each sound is going to have its own levels of what we call overtones that it triggers, and we hear that, and it helps us identify something a little further down the list called timbre. Timbre is the voice of different instruments, and so it's why a flute sounds different than a piano or a clarinet or a trombone or a drum. They each have their own timbre, and that's how you identify it. You can hear it and you go, oh, that's a drum. If you've ever gone to the symphony and you've seen the primary violinist, the first violinist come out, the concert master or the concert mistress, and she plays a note on the violin, and it seems like everybody is tuning to the violinist. But who they're really tuning to, if you listen carefully, is they're tuning to an oboe, that you hear this oboe pitch, and they're all tuning to that. And the reason they're tuning to that oboe is because in those harmonics, it has the most bass sound. It has less number of overtones that create the different sounds of the different instruments. So it's because it's more at that bass, the other instruments can hear better tuning to the oboe than trying to tune to the harmonics of say, a violin, because a violin will trigger some of these other harmonics and they might be tuning to the wrong note. If you play piano, kind of a good way to look at it, because I think piano to me is so black and white. And when I hit a note, say I hit middle C, it also triggers the strings in the piano for the next C, and then it might do an E. There's a whole series of ones that they'll do, and that's what contributes to the sounds. That's what the harmonics are. They're overtones. Another part of the special sauce is timing, the rhythm, the tempo, the beat. And this is what we entrain to. If you've ever gone to a grocery store when we were a little freer and we noticed it more, now we just kind of get in and out when we go. But if you were listening to the music, and as you walk down the aisle, all of a sudden you start walking to the tempo or the beat of the music, that is called entrainment. And that's what happens in timing. And it's our brain's way of wanting to connect outside and equalize with it. Intensity, this could be the volume, this could be the different orchestration that is used. She also mentioned AM, FM waves. That's not my area of expertise. But all these ingredients kind of create a mixing board of sound, and that's what we're perceiving. So what does that mean to us? There are different aspects to music. These aspects will influence our individual responses to music. So we have the nature. We have the nature of like how our equipment operates, what we were born with. We're not blank slates. We heard music in utero. So we already come out with some aspects of music. And our earliest sense that's kind of most developed is the aural, the auditory sense. We hear in regular, just, we're not seeing so well. Taste is something that's going to be more sensitive. But one of the first things that we experience when we're born is hearing sound. But it's also the nurture. It's also, were you raised with this type of music, or were you raised with this type of music? Or did you have, very little music in the household? And we have to keep in mind these aspects when seeking music and music experiences, because each one of us, including our children, it's going to make sense in different ways. Music is not one size that fits all. I can't say, okay, listen to 2 Mozarts and call me in the morning. Mozart might not be what you respond to. There are many wonderful things about Mozart, but it may not be what you respond to. And so as you, for yourself or for your children, keep in mind, how do you feel when you listen to this music, or how do they respond? What do you see in their response? So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But again, music is just not one size that fits all. So keep that in mind. It's going to be very primary for what you need to do. The brain that engages in music is changed by engaging in music. So this contributes to our neuroplasticity. We listen to music, and the brain creates connections, just like it does with other experiences. It will liven up certain parts of the brain. One of the studies that they've done, usually looking in autopsies at musicians' brains and other brains, they look at the corpus callosum, which connects the 2 halves of the brain. And it is thicker in musicians than it is in non-musicians. And they don't know if it's because it has gotten thicker through the experience of music, or the person sought out music because it was already thicker at birth. But that's one area that they also look at in studies of, say, taking piano lessons. They look at the connections between the ear and verbal up here. And they have more strands in the coloring of what they do in something called diffuser tensor imaging that shows 2 years of piano lessons compared to the control group, children 8 to 10, both groups, ages 8, starting age 8 and then to age 10. The ones that did not receive formal music experience had less threads in this diffuser tensor imaging. So our brain tries to regulate with the stimuli. I talked about entrainment. That's that synchronization, that we're responding to what we hear and moving to it. Active involvement in music activates the whole brain and how we think. It affects our brain, our memory, because it is affecting the hippocampus. This is what you'll note. A really good example of that is people with Alzheimer's, who will remember all the lyrics to a song, but may not remember your name or may not remember their child. But you start with the music because it's like it puts it in kind of little different file folders. You have the memory aspect, you have the emotion aspect of that song, and you have the cognitive. And the cognitive may not be working so well with it, but the memory and we can still access it because of the memory and the emotion tie, which can be really strong with a lot of music. For you parents, think back to when you first got your driver's license and the music that you listened to in the car when your parents gave you the keys to the car to take it out with friends on a Friday night. And you can hear that music years later, and you can kind of access that memory and the emotions tied with the excitement and the fun and the pride of having gotten that license and having the fun time of going out with family or with friends. We talked a little bit more about the emotion. It's a real direct highway to emotion. It can work both ways. It activates the amygdala. It can work in a way that's really empowering for you in some ways. Like what a great, I hear this song and it ties me back to a really positive emotion. Sometimes it might tie me into a negative emotion. It might be connected to something that's very sad in my life or that I had to process more deeply. Sometimes I'll use it as a direct way to do that just because I need to finish processing something that was emotionally negative. But that's why you might have strong emotions and start crying to a song that you haven't heard for years. It affects the reward centers, and it gives us those feel-good neurotransmitters of dopamine and serotonin, and sensory. It connects us with other areas that we and creates this multi-sensory experience. Okay, so let's put it to work. Thanks for letting me go through all the dry stuff. I'm kind of a nerd on it, so I think it's quite fun whenever I find out new things about music, but let's actually put the music to work. So we said spark, soothe, and optimize. And here are some things that you can do to help to use at home. Keep in mind, you know your child best, or you know yourself best as to what will work. Or I encourage you to try different things and just be really observant of, for yourself, if you're trying something, what does it feel like viscerally? Do I feel more anxious using this type of music or that type of music? Feel more in a zone where I'm calmer and in kind of a readiness to learn. With your children, you would look at probably behaviorally, unless they tell you, I don't like this stuff. And then, and watch for signs that it might be too energizing or may not be engaging and energizing enough. So playing and moving to music can help teach your child respond to a beat. And the basis of how we talk, how we walk, how we move in life is really organized around a beat. And this can help organize the brain and have an appropriate place to put extra energy. So I encourage you to kind of look for different types of music, or maybe help use it as a precursor to whatever task that you may be less desirable that you want to do. For me, it's 4:00 in the afternoon and cleaning. I'm going to put on some music that's going to help spark me to help me kind of think, okay, get me in this mood. I entrain to it. I organize to it. And okay, I'm going to tackle this mess. But be watching your student or yourself of your response to it. Self-esteem can be boosted through learning to play an instrument, giving confidence for other ventures. I went back and looked at the different things that ADDitude had written about music, and one parent shared how that experience of finding the instrument, and I mean it, I think there's kind of a spirit instrument for everyone. For her child led to this young person growing up and staying involved in music. And it can be very normalizing. You know, a lot of people take music, and you can have that discussion. It creates this kind of platform for discussion. Oh, you take this too, or maybe opportunities to join in band and orchestra at school. Look for, it might be that you do some different trial lessons, looking for a certain teacher or looking for certain instrument that your child responds to. Piano is the queen of instruments, I think, but one of my 4 kids really liked piano. The others all wanted guitar or drums. So my cello teacher says, I never could understand piano, but cello made sense to her. Cello doesn't always make sense to me as much as piano did. So each of us have the instrument, and be aware of that if you get them involved in instrument lessons. Use preferred music activities as reinforcers for desired behaviors. It can be an immediate reinforcement, then work up to longer periods. For example, hey, if you do get your homework done, then you get 20 minutes of, and maybe that's a shared experience with the family. We'll jam on some instruments, or you get to listen to your favorite music, or whatever your student or whatever you find is rewarding and worth it in order to get that less preferred task done. Music and movement are joined at the hip. I highly recommend any type of movement experience that works with music, it creates a social emotional bond, being together with others, in an active and passive participation in music. One of the things that one study found, social and emotional problems can be reduced in active and passive participation in music therapy. And so the active would really involve being in types of groups. Look, if you have young children, and they may not have a diagnosis yet, but you see that they have lots of excess energy and stuff like that, I would look for some sort of developmental music program, music group to be involved in that understands, that the teacher understands development. The curriculum is designed around it. There's a lot of really good programs like Music Together, Kinder Music, Music Garden, and several others that all focus on being developmentally appropriate ways for kids to experience music, because they have to move at that age, and yet have that social aspect of a group. Especially, you can work with very young kids in that way, but and there's fun ways to kind of do fill in the blank songwriting. I'll give you an example after this, but adolescents themselves especially are looking for ways to assert control over their lives, and that's pretty universal, I believe. And so we do so much looking at their overt behavior, but sometimes we also have to, a lot of times we have to take into consideration where they are emotionally, and songwriting can be a great way to express themselves and get in sync with expressing themselves in a way that others maybe can understand as well. So there's different ways to explore it. There's a fill in the blank way, kind of like ad libs. And you can do that pretty much with many, many songs, whether it's very young kids songs, whatever's popular for adolescents. We can do it for ourselves. I did went to a session once where they did a kind of fill in the blank one with Bridge Over Troubled Waters. It was a support group for cancer. Songwriting encourages emotional expression, at the same time introspection. We start to kind of get that theory of mind then, even more, understanding others' perspectives and looking at our own perspectives. So here's just kind of an example. We use for young kids, a lot of times we use Down by the Bay. Down by the bay, where the watermelons grow. I think you're all familiar with this. It doesn't have to rhyme. Things do not have to rhyme in music. In this case, it does. Have you ever seen a bear combing his hair down by the bay? Your student may have like a favorite animal or a favorite companion, or something they want to get silly about, and say, have you ever seen and then some action verb, down by the bay. So it'd be a fun, creative way to use music. Also, sometimes you as a parent get to hear what they're thinking and get to hear more of what's important to them. And so this one is for young children, but as I said, it can be used for any age group. Or there's the more sophisticated where, they might take a melody they know, but they might create their own lyrics to it. Soothing. Listening to music can be a way to help children focus as well as calm themselves for self-regulation. Here I suggest that you really look for their reaction to various types of music. And if you're looking for things to kind of almost program through the day, in the morning, we can tolerate this type of music. In the afternoon, we're good with this type of music. Keep a listening log of the songs and music styles that might calm. You can kind of use it, songs that energize, songs that may lead to dysregulation, and keep that log and use that as your kind of pull out, like, okay, here's my little menu for, okay, what song should we play that we know helps calm them down? Or if it's at 4 o'clock and lull time in the afternoon, we might need it for the energize as well. And dysregulative music, that's not going to contribute much. Be very intentional about the music listening for the outcome you are seeking. So I think a lot of us have music on in the background, and we're listening to it and taking it in, and all of a sudden we might start to feel anxious, and we're like, I don't understand why. There's nothing I'm doing. And it might be just that whatever the tempo, the rhythm of that song that we're listening to is actually contributing to our dysregulation. Or we might be feeling more sleepy over a song. And, if we just have background music on all the time, we're taking it in and listening to it. It might be contributing to some of our own behaviors as well. We also need quiet time during the day. If you overuse music in the day, you just get to the point of habituation where you tune it out, and it's not going to be very effective. Let's optimize. Through playing of instruments, children can work on a lot of different attention areas: sustained attention, alternating attention, impulse control, decision-making, and so on. One study showed that children who studied a musical instrument for 3.5 years showed a reduction of an abnormal brain asynchrony in the auditory area that is found in people with ADHD. It also, music lessons increase your child's ability to work in a noisy environment because because of the music attention, then they start to pick out what's the more intentional or more important things in that noisy environment, so they can kind of factor out like the figure and the ground, the background. You can start to ignore some of the extra noisy, like a classroom is noisy, but you want them to be able to pay attention to, say, the teacher's voice. So that's another area. You can create lyrics to know melodies to teach rote memory items such as phone numbers, addresses, procedures. And we're chunking that information to music, which ties it into our, working memory, motor, and cognition. Start before you get to sit down to work and do something. Start with a music listening segment that's energizing or organizational for yourself or for your child, if you're using it for yourself as well. Listening to music while studying, it's a big question. Annie brought it up, said it was on the Facebook page over the weekend, had over, I think, was it 100 responses, something like that. This came up in a question that a colleague emailed me a few weeks ago. Yes, you can use music to study too. For some students, it really works well, organizes the brain, keeps the brain activated, keeps it activated for that. I need my focus here. So my external, the other stuff that's kind of going on up there that might be distracting me. Well, sometimes the music organizes that and takes care of that while you're doing that. Their effective style might not be your style, so you might want to have them use headphones. My husband's college roommate used to have headphones on, the bigger ones, and he would rock back and forth like this and study. And he was listening to Uriah Heep. So that'll date me. This was back in the 70s. And it worked for him. He went on to get his PhD in forestry. He teaches at a major university. I think looking back, had they done more diagnosis at the time, he might have been diagnosed with ADHD. But it's hard to say now. But he was quite bright as well, which is very common in ADHD. And he could listen to Uriah Heep. I could never study to something like that. In fact, I have a hard time studying to music. So if you're concerned about the type of music that they're listening to, all of us we're making our mark with our music. I still listen to a lot of the music I listen to in that kind of teenage years to the young 20s, and each of us are making our mark on that, what our style of music will be. That's our popular thing. It may be rap, it may be hip hop. Different discussion is whether the lyrics are appropriate and they're going to work for your family. And that's something that you would have to address anyway, whether they were studying to it or not, what's acceptable in your family. But there's a lot of good, great hip hop and rap music out there. It's not all gangster rap. So just keep in mind. Sorry, I got to dismiss this. I had a little timer just to keep me on track. So yeah, it can be different types of music. As we've said, it should be preferred music. What is preferred by them? I can tell you great music, and if they don't like it, it's not going to work. So what you guys can work that out amongst yourselves, but it should be something that they're going to prefer that will work for them. If it doesn't work, then it's not functional. Another thing, time perception and modulation of attention. We know music can do these, and I'm just going to finish up with these last couple of slides, and it's going to be time for question Q&A. But it can, as a temporal and rhythmic art, it can be used to help modulate symptoms of inattention seen in ADHD, and music also teaches predictability. So that's also useful in learning our attention and responses. Lyric analysis is one of my favorite things, especially, kids of all ages can do it. But again, if you're looking at if your children are adolescents, they learn point of view, self-expression, self-reflection. Other people capture it super well when they write the lyrics. And in the music that they prefer, have them really look at the lyrics. So many times we're alerted by the music itself in the melody, and we don't look at the lyrics till years later, and then we go, oh, that's what it sang about. So as a parent too, you can get a clearer picture of what's important to them. Shake It Off is a really good example. It's a great pop song, and I love these words. But I keep cruising, can't stop, won't stop moving. It's like I got this music in my mind saying it's going to be all right. Because the player's going to play, and the hater's going to hate. Baby, I'm just going to shake. I shake it off. I shake it off. I love using this one for lyric analysis. Think about it. If we look at the lyrics, we might understand more where they're coming from. To quickly go over finding the right experience or teacher or therapist, feel free to check with a music therapist. I hear from parents a lot that they did not have success with a regular music teacher. And so I would do the things I've laid out here, find a teacher who has really flexibility in their teaching style, who can look at different methods for a student, be honest with the teacher, share your student's strengths and roadblocks. That way they can plan ahead and be ready. I would, if I had a student coming in and I knew that they had a lot of ability to look around the room and like take it all in and want to play with everything, I'm going to create my room in an environment that's going to be more relaxing for them so we can focus better. Here are some of the references, so feel free to take a look at those. There's others out there available as well, but primarily what I use today. More references. And I just want to thank you for being with me today. I know that there'll be questions coming in. I've got my email on there if you have further questions that we didn't get to. So feel free to email me. And I just want to say happy trails to you. And thank you for joining me today.
Wonderful, Patti. Thank you so much for this overview and for some specific steps that parents and adults can take. We have a lot of really great questions, so I will do my best to hit on as many as possible in our remaining time. Okay. The first one, I just thought it was such a fascinating question. What is the plasticity of the brain with regard to music? Is there a best time to introduce music? And has research shown that the benefits last throughout the lifespan?
Very good question. And yes, it does. The benefits last throughout the lifespan. There's a lot of really cool research out there on this. We're already kind of musically being with our babies when we are talking to them. And you sing lullabies. There's a reason lullabies are universal for helping soothe babies. This is what we have found to work. Sing, I personally would use children's music I like that I know that is not too loud, because babies, you want to watch their ears. You have to watch their hearing. And that's why sometimes, too, you'll see people will go to concerts and stuff, but they'll have ear muffs on their babies. But I've always told parents, use the music that you like, too, as long as it has lyrics that you're okay with being repeated, because they will pick up everything as they start to mature. But I use jazz. My kids are heavy into the rock and roll that we liked. You have to watch the volume, and you have to keep in mind any lyrics that you don't want repeated. But babies are very, very movement oriented, as you can see, and a lot of them start to get really rocking like this at a very young age. Use lullabies, use playful songs. As they grow, you might have some, fun kind of bouncing songs and stuff like that. You're just watching for their neurological development, that they are okay with whatever those movements are. Like your bounce will get higher the more developmentally, neurologically mature they are. But babies are also picking up their taste in music. And so that's why it's a good time to introduce them to music. Say around 7 months, they are starting to, before that language, they might pick up any language, but about 7 months, they're starting to prefer whatever their parents' primary language is. Same goes for music. In music, they will start to show preferences, and they will have likes and dislikes. And the research bears that out. If they would play kind of discordant notes, the facial grimaces, things like that. The baby's not saying, I don't like that. They're just looking funny, or they might not seek that experience. The benefits of a lifetime. Those studies that looked at children being involved, doing musical things as preschoolers, and that helped them be able to focus on sound in a noisy environment. Then what they found with older adults who've started to lose their hearing, they are still better at ferreting out the sound in a noisy environment. So say you're in a room full of people and you have a lot of ambient noise as an older adult, which can be really bothersome if you have some hearing loss starting to go in. And but those with exposure to music are better about being able to focus and hear what they want to hear. So that's just kind of one example. The plasticity of the brain too, there's studies that look at, how, say, those music lessons created more connections from the auditory to the verbal. And it also did it on the right side, which we don't tend to use so much as verbal, but say people who have strokes, who are having what's called Broca's aphasia, and they have difficulty recalling a word. So they will have therapy, and they'll use a type of music intervention called melodic intonation therapy. They'll access through the right brain, because the melody's still intact, to help teach them words again, and get that word retrieval back. And it's possible that if you had music younger and it was building up these connections on the right side, that you didn't need them then, but you might need them later.
It's such fascinating stuff. There was an anecdote in the article that I posted here in the resources that Gabby Giffords, who suffered, traumatic brain injury, used just what you said, used music to activate the right side of her brain, and was therefore able to train her left side to speak again. And it was sort of done through music therapy. So it's just like magic to me. So probably the most common question that we received was this one of music during homework time.
Okay.
You mentioned, so we got the message that there is no one size, no one genre or artist or album set of songs. It's a very personal thing. But we did have a number of questions or recommendations that you might have for that energizing music before homework time, and then alternatively kind of that organizing music or calming music for the during.
Okay. And sometimes during it's the energizing music that actually works. So it might, that's where it comes into, if your child wants to listen to music while doing homework, you can kind of create like a little contract that, so you might have to, they might say, well, this works for me. Well, then they have to kind of show results, right? They have to show that they were able to glean the material, focus on the material, actually get the homework finished, whatever that preferred music is. And so that's where it's hard for me to say a specific type of music for during the homework time and the pre-homework time, because it's going to vary with your child. And I think what I would do is I would try some different, they might say, hey, I really want to do homework to such and such. I want to do it to Eminem. And you're like, well, I don't know if that's going to work. Well, if they show you it can work and the Eminem song was okay with you, then that's the type of, that can be used. It's almost like, when you go in and you make a preference for yourself, you purchase something. Oh, if you liked this book, you might like this book. So whatever that type of music that they showed they were able to work to might lead to finding some other types of music that they can work to as well. They might need more calming music before the homework. See, that's where it's going to be very, very individual. Does that make sense?
Right.
It's really hard for me to say. I can tell you for myself, when I'm faced with a task that's kind of a non-preferred task, or I look around the house and go, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to start with. I have to do this, this, and this. I will sit down and play Bach music on the piano, and that's very organizing for me. Or I'll listen to Bach, and that's very organizing to me. But that might not be for you. You might start to listen to that and just like, it just doesn't, you don't respond to it. So I would start with, at least for the homework piece, maybe talk with, find out what the music they like is, and that might be the place to start.
So a lot of parents are asking, should they rule out music with lyrics? They've heard that lyrics in and of themselves can be distracting, and they've steered their children toward more instrumental. Even someone said that they toward video game music, like the background, do, 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 do. I'm thinking of Super Mario.
Which is pretty organizing.
Right.
That is a very good, thank you for that, bringing up that point. I personally, it is very hard for me to study the music. Music actually distracts me no matter what, from focusing on something that's, if I'm gonna want to listen to the music. Does that make sense? But I'm also very sensitive to music. I hear music and it's kind of like my squirrel moment. Kind of like, oh, I heard that. What was that? And so for me, I like quiet when I study, but doing music without lyrics that would be a good way to start first. Again, it can be very individual response, but music without lyrics is going to activate more the right side of processing. It's like a different processing in a way. It's also processing in the left side of your brain, but the lyrics add another level of attention required, unless you're kind of tuning them out, because you will start to, the lyrics are going to activate parts of your brain to process, okay, what are they saying in the music? But I won't say that, I can't say that's the same for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And I have heard the recommendation that music with lyrics, it's preferred if it's music that's very familiar to you. So someone posted that their daughter has the Hamilton soundtrack memorized. She listens to that and will even sing along while studying. So I would assume that your brain is not working quite as hard to process something that it has memorized in and out.
You're right. Because the other piece is that once you have it memorized or are so familiar with it, and that happens, I think, a lot, then your level of attention to having to process that or kind of figure out or listen to that changes because your brain kind of habituates to it, so I no longer have to think about it so much. I could tell you from a personal experience a long time ago in labor, I used music. And when I got into the more intensive part, what's called transition, which adults all know, I couldn't listen to anything that had lyrics. It was too much of a cognitive overload. So that's another good point. Thank you for that, sharing that. That the more we know music, then we're not having the cognitive overload. And so it would be possible then for the music with lyrics to become just like music without lyrics for that person, because they're not required to pay that much attention. It doesn't need that much attentional response.
Right. Some people are also saying that they or their children listen to music in a foreign language.
Oh, cool.
And I thought that was very interesting, that it theoretically has the same effect, that your brain is like, I'm not going to understand this one way or the other, so I'm just going to
so
let it fade into the...
Yeah. And that would work unless you're studying that foreign language in school.
Exactly. It has to be truly foreign. Yeah.
Then your brain's going to pick out words, like, oh, I recognize that word.
Yes.
But yeah, no, that's another good. And if you think about it for yourself, isn't that the way it is? You listen to music in a foreign language that you're not even going to be able to possibly understand or have any really recognition. And it does become kind of almost like the melody. It gets really tied in with it. That's a really good point.
And we've heard a lot of anecdotes over the years at ADDitude. Some people who swear that they work best listening to hard rock and heavy metal. Now that's definitely not going to work for everyone, but a number of parents here are saying, it couldn't possibly be true. Could it? Well,
it can. It can, because think about it. Think about the beat in many rock songs. Of course, there's a lot of variety to the rock songs, but okay, I'm of course dating myself, but if I were to hear bum 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 bum, that would alert me. I'd be like, okay, this is time, and this is a song I know really well, and I can put this on, and I can do such and such task. Does that make sense? It's Deep Purple, and it's it's Smoke on the Water, and I'm going to, that it's going to, and that's a really strong beat, and my body wants to entrain to it. My brain's like, oh, alert time. I perceived it. Because part of the whole thing is what's going to get through your brain stem, what's going to get into your cranial nerves, and then the brain's going to say, oh yeah, this is okay to go forward. Because without that kind of alerting in the beginning stages of that auditory process, it doesn't even, your brain's like, no, if they're not letting it through. So that beat, whatever's going to alert you, is going to be strong and may just get you in the framework to actually do the work that you need to do. So I talked to one person once, and they said, oh yeah, I listen to Metallica to relax on the way home from work. I'm like, okay, wouldn't work for me probably, but it totally worked for him. So,
and
go ahead.
We had a number. We're down to our last minute, so I'm going to squeeze in as much as I can. We had a couple of questions about morning routine, and I'll just say a quick note that we have heard from a number of parents that they have created like a soundtrack to their child's morning, and this kind of taps into what you were just saying, that the soundtrack will signal to the child when it's time to brush teeth, when it's time to go get their shoes on, and can reduce nagging as well as keep them moving. So that's just an idea I wanted to.
That's another really good one. Yes, you will reduce the sound of your voice having to intervene. So then your voice, when you do need it, is more effective.
Right.
And if that happens, that they can have this routine. Just think of how much calmer everything goes, because that music alerts you as to what you need to do.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Brilliant.
Okay, I'm going to squeeze in one more, though we're at time, and we'll wrap it up.
It says the webcast time has been extended, so
I don't know. We'll take it. We'll take an extra minute here. Because this was another very common question. You said that you considered piano sort of the queen bee, but of course it doesn't work for everyone. We had a number of parents wondering, is there an instrument where kids tend to have the most success? Like they just want their children to have some success with an instrument, and maybe they move on from there. Would you say that is piano if they're looking for a first step?
I love piano because it teaches, when you do get into note reading, it teaches you two different languages, basically two different clefs, what's in the left hand and what's in the right hand. And it reads differently on the staff. And the piano's, to me, it's black and white. So it's, the black keys help you, that breakup of the colors helps you identify where things are. And I find it to be kind of a good jump off instrument for going into other things that they are interested in, and can be kind of a user-friendly way to enter the realm of music lessons. But then I would also talk to my child to kind of get a sense of what they're interested in. And some places some music programs, MusicWorks did this all the time, where we would kind of create like a sampler someone might do this one week, that, different instruments. They might try guitar, they might try piano, they might try violin, or might try ukulele. And then they choose which one they like the best. So then you have that buy-in from your child.
Yeah.
Because that's huge in what the success is going to be. I personally really like ukulele a lot. It's very user-friendly, except yet at the same time, it has so much. So you can go really far in it. So it's, it seems like it's a very user-friendly, user-entry-friendly kind of thing, where you can have success right away. You can be singing a song with one chord right away. And the way the strings are, you can create a lot of easy formations with it. It's not as hard as guitar. Guitar takes a little more finger tensile strength than ukulele does. Yet, it can be a lifetime instrument, as many Hawaiians can tell you, and create really elaborate music. So you could actually study it for a long time. But it can also, be a precursor to doing guitar lessons or other types of lessons. So those, I would, just try to find out, what your child is interested in, that you can kind of get into, maybe rent an instrument. Ukuleles, you can get some pretty nice sounding ones for not too expensive, and get their buy-in, find out what they like. If they have interest in a few different things, or if you have piano and just play around with them on the piano a little bit, just kind of get that, see where their interests lie. Find a teacher who will be good at helping, just taking into account different learning styles. Or find a place too, if you have a few instruments they want to try, that will let you try, it could be a music school, like a nonprofit community music school type place, or a for-profit community music school, that will let you try some different instruments. So you get that. So you have all those kind of things in place before, so it can get to more success. And then setting up a regular kind of practice time, which is everybody's bugaboo. Everybody.
Yeah, routine, right. Wonderful. Well, we are out of time, which I'm very sad to say. Yes, thank you so much. for this session. I think the parents and adults listening got a lot out of it, and they're coming away with some new ideas about how to harness the power of music, especially at this time when kids are learning at home, and it can use all the help we can get here. So thank you so much, Patti, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope that you will, listeners, that you will keep in mind that ADDitude does have weekly webinars, and we hope that you will join us. 1 week from today, December 9th, we have a session on a mid-year motivation guide. Very helpful for students learning at home or doing hybrid learning with Dr. Sharon Celine. So yes, please join us for that. And again, if you're looking for the resources for this webinar, you can search the ADDitude website for podcast 335. But that's all for today. Thank you again, Patti, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.